Welcome to the first MENA SCM Log 5.0. Institute of Supply Chain Management and its forum wings is starting the first event in Dubai in this series of MENA SCM Logs. And we intend to bring high quality discussions into the room and also look at the most relevant areas of discussion in supply chain as we move ahead with more offerings. And I'm really thankful to all of you to have come in the numbers that we expected. We are not going to be very big forums, but we thought we would be a quality forum and would have discourses in the areas of supply chain and logistics. Having said this, I think one of the most interesting part of change that has happened, and we all talk about COVID, disruptions, and the supply chain changes that are taking place post-COVID. Let me focus on few things pre-COVID. And if anything has changed post-COVID, can anyone say that the whole supply chain has been revamped or is moving in a different direction post-COVID? When the going gets good, we forget all about doing supply chain transformation. And that's the tragedy for strategic transformation of organizations, because we have lived in an age of actually performing, and we don't want to miss and capitalize on opportunity that emerges even after crisis. Some of the things that I would bring today on the table is essentially problems of the past, which seems to be proliferating into the future, and not much has been done. Let me give you a piece on technology. If you see, one of the biggest change that should have happened is technology. But when you interact with people around the globe, you find that implementing technology to the requirement of the business is one of the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenge, and the roadmap is a challenge. The change is a challenge, mindset is a challenge, and hence supply chains also have their own problems. I think one beautiful thing that has happened is that the pandemic has actually brought forth the problems with mindsets, problems with transformation, and problems with change management. If you see organizations across the globe, someone by name Laura Serere, she wrote a very interesting article which said that when you look at sales and operation planning, you find that everybody puts in place a structure, processes, and transformation. But everybody violates this by bringing something called as dynamic sales and operation planning, by actually denying what the sales and planning processes had agreed to. So you need to bring dynamism in this particular framework, and you distort the planning processes. Now this is the challenge, because when opportunity comes, your SNOP becomes dynamic. It does not have a mechanism to be inclusive of the dynamism. It does not include how do we see different growth structures into place. Probably it's the planning that is at the root cause of it. Let me get a little structural in the presentation. And what I think is, when we look at different aspects of planning, one of the most important elements has been forecasting. And today, if you really talk to people, people say forecasting is dead. When you talk to, if you see the new supply chain knowledge and practice, one of the fundamental change that is happening is that people are talking about moving away from a very deterministic forecasting methods to more which are resilient. Something which is resilient. And by definition in supply chain, resilient is one where you can bring more agility and visibility into the process. Is that enough? In the pursuit of moving from a very, very deterministic to more resilient, when we bring in just agility and visibility, is that going to be enough? It's a change in the right direction, but may not be enough. Why? You are visible of what's there. You can execute better with visibility. You can plan your near-term business continuity with visibility. And you can actually reach your customer much faster with a lesser cost with agility. But are disruptions something just to do with resilience? And this is a big question that one needs to ask. What happens when you have to predict this disruption in future? Building a capability around disruptions and its impact in the short run is not just planning or forecasting. And hence the new philosophy of forecasting needs to imbibe all those elements of forecasting that macroeconomics have brought into the picture. It is not just deterministic to resilient, but it's also futuristic. A lot of us who say forecast can never be right. You know, if you see all those books of epics, which a lot of us do as our certification program, to the first step towards understanding and being relevant to the business of planning and supply chain, probably this particular process of learning, estimating, all of them are just in the past. If I ask you use Excel sheet, you use Excel sheet for the past data. You extrapolate the past, which is not at all continuous in the future. What do? I was consulting with a firm a few years back. They were very progressive. And they were doing what-if analysis, and they said this is scenario planning. Amazing. In exceptional planning becomes scenario planning to organizations. Do we really plan our scenarios? And today, this is what I'm saying, that when you start looking at the transition in forecasting and demand planning, it's just not resilience. It's resilience plus understanding the future scenarios. We have never put a kind of framework to understand scenarios. We don't plan for the future. We don't plan for the long term. We don't plan for our growth, because if you don't plan for scenarios, you don't plan for long term, you don't plan for growth. And can an organization actually plan without the growth? Can you forecast and do your demand planning and supply planning without the growth in the mind? I have seen organizations which look at bottom of the pyramid markets across the globe, even in the MENA region. You see the way these markets have been growing in terms of consumer growth. And what have we been doing? We have been using past data. All your Excels are past data. Do we really do causal forecasting? Do we really do geopoliticals and macroeconomic factors into your scenario planning and even simple causal predictive planning? And that's the challenge that organizations have today. The new philosophy of forecasting would require that we move towards a framework where we understand the change. We understand change from a broad perspective and move ahead. Organizations actually at least I don't see, because we have a lovely course called as Certified Demand Planning and Forecasting Professionals. We have a lot of people from UAE also taking up the course, from India and some other countries. What we find surprising is that everybody moves to Excel. Large number of companies are still on Excel, and we're talking about a complete transformation, digital transformation of supply planning. We need to start there. We need to understand this. We need to move and see how this can help. And for that, you know what we need? We need to know what we need to forecast, why we need to forecast, for when do we need to forecast, what is the long horizon that we forecast, what are the disruptions that can come, and how do I build this into all my algorithm into the APOs or new generation's connected planning tools. The day we understand this, technology can be of amazing help and can bring this transformation in a big way. There is often a confusion after this long macro perspective, forecasting, demand planning, and demand management. Where does that change? What is forecasting? How is it different than demand planning? How it is different than forecast management? I think I would call them as the pillar of forecasting. Technology is the facilitator. It's necessary. The sufficiency that we need to bring about is this, that are we able to forecast different patterns of scenarios that will emerge in the marketplace in the future through the tools and methods that we have. Yesterday, there was a very interesting question. We had a sustainability dialogue, a very interesting question raised by Sasikiran from Jasinmal. I think that's the question. How do you really see this kind of intermittent demand, unique demands, and dynamic demands? How do you put them into your framework of understanding through methodologies? What is the methodology that you're going to use? What do? We do something like this. Every time you look at anybody, so what do? We say, what is forecasting? What is forecasting error? Let's meet the error. As I grew up a professor in forecasting domain and met industries through the last 20 years, one thing I always saw, that people will say, come on, my total forecasting error is 11.2%. That's aggregate. Or someone will say 3.6%. These are two products I picked up from a Harvard Business School case study that I love and teach. Actually, they don't know that this is the variation that's coming up, 1,573%, 86, 52, and weighted average of that is 11.2. When you cumulate all your plus and minuses goes away, your error is much lesser. Is this what you report? Or you report something which is very different and see the variability in your this thing? That's the first question that I raise. Granular forecasting is going to be very, very important in future. And all those who lived into the old MRP, why did you wanted the old MRP? Because you wanted an aggregate forecast. Disaggregate them according to your own requirements and understanding and your silos. And then you say this is how you plan. When you plan with the wrong premises and wrong numbers, your errors are going to be multiplied. Someone from Accenture approached us some 3 years back. They were doing some, this wing does work for retailers in Canada. So he said, my client is asking, how do I reduce the forecast error? The purpose of any planning is not to reduce forecast error. I can reduce forecast error by, if there is anyone in analytics here, he can definitely do it right now by using an alternate method, by restricting the variable, making different assumptions, and say, my forecasting is amazing. Right, Bomsi? This is so true, right? All of us do this. That's where methodology fails. That's where methodology fails, because it does not really tell us what these numbers says. There is a group of people who have jolted a lot of us a little. They may not be very strategic. It's called DDMRP, Demand-Driven Material Resource Planning. They are saying, why do you forecast? Take the order, which is the true forecast, true demand, and make your system agile by creating buffers at different zones so that you never run out of this thing. Why forecast? And a lot of us get convinced because we have been forecasting wrong. We have been forecasting wrong. And what is these orders? Average demand for 1 week or 1 month. You are also forecasting. What are you doing? Time series. And you are telling the world that use orders. So this is the dilemma of forecasting, and hence whether you do an SNOP-based aggregate forecast, break it into disaggregate forecast, or you do the DDMRP-based, where you get the numbers from the orders, all of them give you a distorted numbers like this. Now, I can't name the companies, but wherever we have seen some training or some consulting, this is what the dilemma comes. How do you move from here? Actually, is forecasting that important that you start looking at these errors and move ahead? No. Forecast at the best gives you the baseline. Forecast has given you what is happening in your market, what is your history. The change that you see comes from orders, yes, but it also comes from other demand signals in the market which you need to capture. And this is why if forecasting is padded up by a great demand sensing and great understanding of the market through the orders and is evaluated, you put a layer to forecast with this particular demand sense, you get a demand plan. You can vary your sensing methods based on your product characteristics, market characteristics, and the kind of the markets that you go. If you are in Africa, you need to have the bottom of the pyramid markets approaches. But if you have demand plan, I can tell you, and there's so many planners I can see here, one thing that I say is very important. It's not the accuracy that matters. It's the demand plan accuracy that matters and not your forecast plan. And whenever companies have done this way, we have seen that they have improved their ability to predict markets and understand markets. The new philosophy requires you to assimilate forecast with what's happening in the market, your ability to sense, and your ability to sense it better. And then understand that is the demand variability accuracy is more important than the forecasting. We mess up. And if you don't do this, this is where we come to. Most of you in manufacturing will find yourself here. There is another 1963 Harvard Business School case study called Barilla Spy. And people say, why does one use 1963 case study or 1980 case study? Sorry. They started to say, why do you use this case study? We use this case study is simply to show that your mean is 300, your standard deviation is 227, and you hold the inventory of 1,000, and if there's a crisis, you say, thank God I had inventory, so I did better during the pandemic. Amazing resilience, right? It's your past problems that you carry with you, and you justify those past problems by saying, just in case, just in time, or just a way of talking about it. First, understand, if I just do a safety stock calculation, some MBAs also, I met them, 1,200. We all have this in your distribution channel. Wherever in the world, however shorter your channel is, you keep this. Why? Because you work on forecast or you work on orders. This is work on orders. You see how we spike. This, in fact, Dubai is a very interesting place. It's an event market, right? Everything is event. And if everything is an event, look at this, how you move. One event, you move up. The event goes down, you move down. You come expo, you move there, right? You come down. These are markets which are different. Do you understand them? You are looking at your growth and your targets. You're not looking at the market that's defining your trend. Everything has to be understood in black and white. You can just make a difference. 1980 case studies is so relevant today post-pandemic. And I'm ready to debate on this because this is fundamentally the change that we need. Understand this. And if you understand this, break them into multiple supply chains. Break them into different buffer zones. Try to get something which can help you to get some idea from the DDMRP and borrow the SNOP or IBP approaches which can help you to plan this thing. And this is why I say the next step that we need to move to understand this is to see that how do you manage demand in the era when everything is changing. And the only word that is changing is uncertainty. It's taking different forms. Whether it is disruption of global logistics shipping routes, whether it is disruption in terms of geopolitical war, whether it is disruption in terms of recession, or disruption in terms of inflation, are we able to capture them in your methodology? We talked big about big data, we talked about machine learning, and I think there's a large number of people who project this as tools. Yes, these tools are important, but do we really know what we need from them? Unless we know the basics of forecasting, the new philosophy of forecasting is not going to be very distinct. These are the few approaches that we have been following. Time series forecast, expert forecast estimation, and some market research. And Salesforce composite, all the Salesforce. And all of them have been historically driven. You get the data from your distribution channel of the last period. You don't estimate what your demand is. You just put something over the period and you look at it. And all these methods have been this thing. Only one method which could give you some predictability called causal, that's regression. Nobody uses it. Nobody uses it. I think I'm making a claim here that nobody uses macro forecasting, primarily because only few causal relationships are known. We have never investigated causal relationships in forecasting. And hence, when we move towards that, we get into problems. There are three things that has happened. This market is fashion market, retail market. One of the fundamental challenges that I saw even in the question that Sasikiran put yesterday is proliferation of products. Huge proliferation of product, and people have been saying that I'll do ABC analysis. Gone are those days when you can use them. These are compulsive introduction in the market for you to stay alive. And if they're compulsive introduction in the market for you to stay alive, understand them. Amazon effect. I think the difference between Amazon and Walmart is this. Walmart has partners, 21, 23 partners, which contribute to around 40 to 80% of their sourcing from, these are all Nestle's of the world or other companies, bigger companies of the world. What is Amazon? You have to go to this Amazon zone, integrate yourself, and second thing is that anybody in the world can just sit on Amazon and sell. Increasing the dimensions of availability of product and competition. And when you have to go to e-commerce, I can tell you most companies which are very big companies across the globe, multinationals, find it difficult to integrate e-commerce as a channel, which is the fastest growing channel. So the Amazon effect is very good for smaller players, but it's a very difficult process of transition for bigger manufacturing companies. Funding is the most costliest channel that we find. I don't know, there are a lot of views that we'll get it in the afternoon on this thing, but this is fundamentally the challenge that is happening. How do you create a framework of planning where you can integrate yourself with the Amazon effect? And that challenge is coming up because the way the e-commerce has grown in the last 1.5 years is unprecedented, and people thought that it will change, but it's not changing. It's consolidating, it's maturing, and it's growing. Second, as you go into different markets in the world, and even if I look at MENA region, the kind of potential that this region provides for bottom of the pyramid approaches, meaning that the kind of product proliferation that will take place, and how e-commerce can reach them. There are companies here, I won't name them, but they are really trying to reach this region in a very different way. And if that's happening, how do you plan for them? Planning is not an automatic activity. You know, it's not an enigma that happens. It is something that you need to plan. With a very good execution system, planning becomes important. I think some of the execution players do not really understand that if they don't have a better planning tool, they will not have a better execution system, or you can marry the two things in a very collaborative framework with partners. Now, this is the challenge. Market volatility, I think everyone knows it. You all have seen it much better than professors simply professing about volatility, right? If you really look at something like this, all planners here will say that they don't forecast the long tail. If there is proliferation, look at all your tails. There's huge long tails. I think Vamsi was telling me yesterday with some data. I thought I'll deal with that data here, Vamsi. This is the long tail that you are struggling to forecast. And how do you really look at this long tail? How do you integrate into your process? Because this is really interesting to see that there is huge product proliferation on one hand. There is more frequent replenishment that's happening, and mostly in fashion retail, or any fast-moving retail systems. This is going to be a challenge. How are you going to forecast them? What are we doing till now? We are forecasting the best averages. One number planning, average of what is time series? Anyone who uses Excel, and my professor who does that, he aggregates everything, creates one number, and wow, it looks amazing on the Excel sheet, right? What does it do? It fools you because your long tail, which is extremes, are different. And these extremes have changed. As you go with e-commerce, as we go with the challenges for the FMCGs across the globe, there are unique, intermittent, and zero demand periods. Zero demand periods. Tell me, how do you do with one number? And that's going to be the difference, that if you want to make it resilient, then it has to integrate the changing dynamics post-COVID. And this is the reality post-COVID. And it's not very difficult. Given your huge investment in AI and machine learning and big data, you have every tools available. I think anyone with .IU can give you solutions. Perhaps if they understand this. And if they understand this, the solution is very simple. How do I forecast the long tail? So forecasting becomes very relevant. Yesterday we were talking about forecasting. It came up in terms of sustainability, because you plan better, you reduce waste, it's sustainable. It adds to your ESG numbers. So it's as good as that. But how do you plan these particular things better? And you do this simply by using probability forecasting. You go for a range. You don't go for 100 numbers in demand. You go for 50 to 150 as range. Map them over distributions, map them over segments, map them over seasons, and you have a better result. You can map them not only with different seasons, you can map them with all the causal variables that causes them. And if you have MINL, because the old data sciences had a hypothesis to predict things. The new data sciences uses almost everything you put in the box in a structured and unstructured way to take out the insight based on what's happening. And hence, it can really do wonders. Moving towards more intelligent forecasting imbibed in your connected planning can make a huge difference. And this is why, though I was a little critical of technology, but this is the change. This is the fundamental change. I picked up from McKinsey. If it's not written there, I put it here. What is happening? Place sensor everywhere, create networks everywhere, automate everything, analyze everything to improve performance. You create a closed-loop planning system by integrating every element of a supply chain as end-to-end supply chain. Each and every node gives you the intelligence data. And each and every node which gives you the data can help you to understand the whole supply chain optimization along with demand planning. And demand planning remains one of the fundamental things. I'm not going to show very jazzy slides and what it does, but it is very important for us to realize that when we integrate this, it will do away with all your MRP planning. All of you are, caught up with some MRP planning because there are people who are trained in old MRP. What do? Their lead times of manufacturing and delivering and procuring is much higher than the customer tolerance time. And hence, you are left only with inventory as a solution. Here is the need to move ahead and say, no inventory or less inventory, even in disruptive times, great visibility of where do I procure by knowing all those things, and making a difference and understanding where the problem lies. You could see anywhere. This is a network of Amazon network. I think if I only talk about Amazon, it will not be fair. But if I just talk about the framework within which it is being done, it's amazingly different. And this is where we make a huge difference to this thing. And hence, analytics and closed-loop planning can help you understand a lot of things. I'll just give you an example because I may be overrunning my time, and also we have started a little late. You can understand advertisement, local competition, shop attractiveness, shop assortment and layout, available products at the point of sale, and expiring product if you have this data and a simple analytics tool. What do? They do your demand sensing. They tell you what lies where in what forms, what is needed where and in what forms. That's what you need. All the data can give you this structure, and they also give you in what range they are required, in distributions they are required. There could be a period of zero demand. If a market like this has a huge event as the pusher for demand, obviously you will have zero demand for so many products in so many period of time. You need to understand that rather than push. So you can understand whether special events, seasonality, income level, economic outlook, local development. This is very important. Look at whole of Africa, the way it is changing. In the MENA region, if you don't see local development, you don't see your market growth, you don't have a growth strategy, and your planning does not take into account the growth strategy. And this is very, so you need to look at what data I need. This could change for every company in the context in which it operates in the market, and hence this is different. Yes, this is something very interesting. Can we map the whole supply chain? So a lot of us say that there's a trace and track. Brilliant. Trace and track alone is not enough. Along the supply chain. Do you know where your suppliers are, their sub-suppliers are? What happens if there's a disruption? Where do you get your material from? In what format you can move? What is the lead time that you take? We have no business continuity plan married in planning. Planning has to have a business continuity plan. And it should be as visible as this. It should have the dashboards of me knowing where and how I can really do away with the disruption. That's planning. That's purely a planning where we don't do anything about it. This is a company in India. They're not our sponsors, but I love them. They gave us data on a daily basis on COVID. So most companies, FMCs, what did they do? If this is a zone of containment zone, they knew where the high demand periods are. They only worked on the high demand period. Factories where you can actually produce, because these are factories not in the containment zone, they worked out. They worked out the whole supply chain as if it is a great integrated business planning. And most businesses learn one thing. War rooms were one learning from pandemic. Come together, think together, see the visibility, plan for that market. Be in business, continue your business. And I think this is very important. This is what visibility does. And if visibility does this, we need to move towards investing in visibility tools. And visibility tools should be actually married to all execution and planning tools. This element missing in any tool is a complete no, because the basic resilience, as I said, is visibility and agility. You can bring agility by showing where it is and in what form it is, but you cannot bring visibility, you can't bring resilience. And everything depends upon data. Now, data is a story, and I'll end with this. We have too many data, too much data. We said we can analyze too many data. Make your data a product for users in your organization. It should be a product which services every function in the supply chain or anywhere for that matter. As we're talking supply chain, Data should be usable by everybody and visible by everybody. You cannot have raw data and warehouses of data and this thing. What is the purpose of this data? How can I make it usable? And a better way to put your data to work is an article in Harvard Business School, amazing article, which says that if I can customize the data for the user as a product, the productivity of planning and optimization and execution increases by almost 100%. You completely do away with the gaps. And if you completely do away with the gaps, your ability to plan becomes much better. I think the world is moving towards this philosophy of forecasting. Not with the Excel sheet, not with the numbers, not with the methods, but a very integrated framework where you use data to, you create data as a product to solve all your problems. That's what forecasting should be, or demand planning should be. Thank you.